Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our afternoon webinar. My name is Marika. I work at Unlimited, and we are just waiting for a few more attendees to log in. But I just wanted to say hello to those of you who are online and who are listening, and just to welcome you. We'll be starting in a minute or two. Hopefully while we're waiting, hopefully you can see the screen okay. You should be able to see our presenter Habib in the top right-hand corner, and also his screen, his slides. So hopefully that's coming through okay, and hopefully you can then in turn hear my voice okay. So many thanks for all of you for dialing in and signing up. Hopefully you will find the next hour really helpful. Habib is a friend of Unlimited and has kindly stepped in to run the webinar for you today on sustainability in entrepreneurship. Habib will share a bit about his background personally, but he is a co-founder of a coaching and a development company, working with clients to help them develop their sort of sustainability for their companies and what that means and how can they create innovation through that. He also works and teaches at the CAS Business School, which is just around the corner from Unlimited actually. So today's webinar, it will last an hour. We've asked Habib to talk for about 45 to 50 minutes, which can be quite a short time, but we'll see how he gets on with that. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes for questions. So do post questions through the chat function that you'll hopefully see in the GoToWebinar dashboard that it's on your screen. So type in a question, I'll make a note of those, and when we come to the end, I will read those out to Habib and he can then respond. Any questions we don't have time for, or if there's something that comes up afterwards, once you've had a bit of time to digest the webinar, then feel free to post those, email those through to us, and we'll get those answered as well. Okay, I think we're probably ready to go, so I'm going to hand over to our presenter, Habib Lesevic, and hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. As Marika said, I am the co-founder of a coaching and development company called Context, which works on sustainable development with its clients. I'm also a lecturer at CAS Business School and ESCP Europe, and at times at the Royal College of Art. I teach systems theory, integral theory, entrepreneurship, and sustainability, so you see quite a bit of theory pop up during this presentation. I'm also involved with the Institute of Integral Entrepreneurship in London, which aims to promote integral entrepreneurship. So let's kick off. Today's topic, the title is Sustainability in Social Entrepreneurship. That's quite a broad title, and I'd like to specify it a bit more closely. The question I want to cover today is how can we leverage the concept of sustainability to build a great social venture? And in order to answer that question, let's kick off, jump right in and ask, actually, what do we mean by sustainability? What is sustainability? We're talking about social entrepreneurship, so we might be talking about fair wealth distribution, about education, about health and well-being, maybe about human rights, maybe about the collective, anything that's pertaining to the collective. Or maybe we're talking about the individual, because after all, what collective can exist without a healthy, happy individual? Or maybe we're talking about the environment. This usually resonates with the term sustainability. Many people think ecology or environment when they hear sustainability. In fact, the Oxford Dictionary describes sustainability as the ability to maintain a certain rate or level of production while conserving an ecological balance by avoiding depletion of natural resources. Now, that's a very ecologically focused definition. I'm not a big fan of this. We have our own definition. At the Institute of Integral Entrepreneurship, we define sustainability as the process of ensuring the continuous functioning and development, that is, yeah, of a system, its participants, and its environment. So going back to the question we asked before, what sustainability in the social context, collective, individual. Here we're covering system, participants, and environment. So what we see is that effectively sustainability is larger. It's a larger topic than just the social dimension. It includes the social dimension, but it's bigger than the social dimension. In fact, we identify 4 dimensions to sustainability. And if you'd like to know more about how we work these dimensions out and where they come from, I suggest you check out my colleague's webinar from a couple of weeks ago on value, integral value creation. Benedict Voigt's webinar, he goes into the theory behind this. Effectively, we identify 4 dimensions of sustainability, kicking off with the economical dimension, the environmental dimension, the socio-cultural dimension, and the psycho-spiritual dimension. And these terms sound complicated, but what it really means is the economical dimension is the individual objective dimension, which effectively means how careful am I being with the resources that I'm using. So, you know, how much is coming in, how much is going out, how much am I burning, am I destroying more resources and more value than I'm actually creating. Financial sustainability, for example, fits into the economical dimension. The environmental dimension is the question of our relationship to external systems, so ecology, infrastructure, and so on. Are we maintaining an environment, are we helping to maintain an environment in which we can continue to exist, or are we eroding the basis of our existential livelihoods through our activities? The socio-cultural dimension is what we touched upon before, anything from within the collective, so effectively wealth distribution, health, collective health effectively, education, literacy levels, and so on. The psycho-spiritual dimension is the individual dimension. That means the individual psychological, spiritual health of the individual. When I say spiritual, I don't mean in some strange way. I mean the inner experience of myself as a being on this planet. Am I growing? Am I developing? How am I feeling about myself? Am I happy with my life? Am I happy who I am? When we talk about sustainability, when we talk about true sustainability, really we need to think about all of those dimensions. They must come together. So sustainability is always integral, at least in this context as we're covering it here. And I'd argue for that. Okay, so sustainability is always integral. Question is then, moving right on, what are sustainable systems like? Because systems effectively means venture or business, what you guys are setting up, you know, social venture, what you guys have been setting up, what you guys have been working on. What does a sustainable system look like? What are its characteristics? And from our research, we found that effectively there are eight characteristics to any sustainable system. First, it has a clear purpose. It has an ethos or a set of guidelines and rules that guide it in its actions. So values, effectively, we would say in the human context. It has a certain degree of transparency, so we can see what's going on. We know what's going on in there. It's open, so it allows for inflows and outflows of resources. It's not shut. It's not closed. It allows for participation and contribution. So that means effectively it is participating in a larger whole, and it also has people participating in it, and it's contributing to a larger whole, and it receives contributions from a larger whole. Also, it's effective, so it achieves the purpose that it sets out to achieve, and it's efficient, so it achieves the purpose it sets out to achieve in a way where it doesn't destroy more resources than it actually creates. So effectively here we could speak of limiting wastefulness in regard to effectiveness and efficiency. Yeah, all right. So as I was just saying, the DNA, the guidelines, the defining boundaries is the purpose and the ethos, the understood flow of resources, information, in transparency, participation and contribution. Also, this is an important concept of interdependency. It means effectively that the system we are creating, we are building, the venture you are building achieves an interdependency with its surrounding. That means its surrounding needs your venture, and your venture effectively makes use, contributes, needs your environment. It's not a one-sided relationship. All right. So on the conceptual plane, we've discussed integral sustainability and the characteristics of sustainable systems. All right. But we still want to ask, we haven't touched upon the question, how can we leverage the concept of sustainability, this concept of sustainability, to build a great social venture? And in order to answer that question, let's look at how sustainability and business currently work together, or yeah, what's currently going on in business in terms of sustainability. And when we look at the reality at the moment, most businesses really don't consider or care about sustainability. And the few that do usually embed it superficially. What I mean by that is you'll have a product or a service or a process, something that you do, your venture's raison d'etre, if you like, the way you go about it, and that's a given, that's a fix, and on top of that you add a layer of sustainability. So in practice this could be something that in marketing terms we would call an augmented product. So for example, EasyJet offering carbon offset to its flights. So there you go, you can take this flight, and if you pay a little extra, you're offsetting the carbon. It's an augmented product. You have sustainability applied in the form of a moral pledge. For example, use less plastic bags, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, etc. Or even fair trade is somewhat of a moral pledge approach, where we say, hey, we're doing pretty much what everyone else is doing. We're doing it slightly differently, and hence it's more sustainable. Hence you should pick us because it's the right thing to do. The last way, the third way, it's not the last way, but the third way that sustainability is applied often superficially is as corporate social responsibility, or just basically PR. I've got Shell, BP on here. I think you can certainly think of other ones. I can definitely think of other ones that use it in that way. In any case, sustainability effectively is implemented as an additional layer of cost. It's considered a cost. So I'm doing this, hence it's making it more difficult for me to be financially sustainable, to be economically sustainable. And this is especially a common issue with social enterprise. And what that leads to with the superficial application of sustainability is that either we're failing to achieve our missions as a social venture, so we're setting out to achieve something larger, shared value on a social play, either we're failing to achieve our mission because the layer of sustainability doesn't cover enough of our practices, or we end up struggling existentially. That means we're not making enough money, we're not getting the right people involved, we can't find any buyers for our services or products, effectively, any takers for that sense. The alternative to the superficial approach would be to flip the script and effectively make sustainability the core, the informing core for our entire venture. What exactly does that mean? How do we go about making sustainability the core of our venture? And there we want to borrow from design thinking. Effectively, we want to turn sustainability into a design constraint for our venture. What's a design constraint? Well, designers will use setup constraints in the attempt to solve a problem when they are looking to innovate. Effectively, they will define a few parameters by which they will abide and try to develop a solution within these parameters. To give you an example of a French designer, Arthur Baudelec, who worked on a project which was called, I think, Jumping Jack. He set out the paradox task of developing a chair that moves. This was part of a larger project or a larger exploration of design and astonishment. Effectively, that was a theme under which this project was run. And he effectively said he wanted to develop a chair that moves, and he set 3 constraints for himself when starting off the design process. The first one was it has to be dead when it's not used, so it should move when it's not used. Secondly, it has to become alive, or it has to come alive when it is interacted with. And thirdly, it must use kinetic energy, so no electricity allowed or any other means. It has to be kinetic energy that moves it. So basically, he took these constraints, and from there, it's a wild experimentation process. And he developed something that looked like this as his first draft. As you come closer, you sit on it, it moves, and it becomes a chair. So it's actually a moving chair. Now, this is quite basic, it's maybe not the world, this chair, and I don't know if I would want to have it, you know, standing in my home. It doesn't look great. But then with this initial idea, with the first solution to his, with the minimum viable product effectively, the first solution to his design constraint construct that he built, the constraints that he set, this little axiom, the setup, having found a solution from it, from there he could evolve and build something else. So suddenly he came up with something like this, which is, I think, quite interesting for at least bars and nightclubs here in London. So just to illustrate to you how designers go about solving and innovate, solving problems and innovating. They set constraints and they then try to move within these constraints. So to transpose this to our discussion, okay, what we're looking at designing a venture, okay, in a way where it is informed by and subject to a sustainability vision. So a vision on sustainability, which is effectively the design constraint that we set out to design around. Okay, how do we do that? Let's look into that. Designing with sustainability, building an integral venture. Cool. We said your venture design needs to be informed by and subject to a sustainability vision. That means we've got the element of the venture design and we've got the element of the sustainability vision. We've covered the vision briefly, the elements that I would like you to think of when you develop a sustainability vision, which are effectively the question as social ventures, of course, how are you impacting the social cultural dimension? Also the question, how are you impacting the psycho-spiritual dimension? So the individuals that are participating in your venture as individuals, how are you affecting them? What forms of expression do they, what ways to grow effectively by participating in the venture can they experience? And of course, on the economical dimension, that's in our current system, this is a must, being efficient and sustainable, not for you. Okay, then the question comes up, what's venture design? What does that stand for, venture design? And here I'd like to propose to you 5 building blocks that you can think of or consider when thinking about, when going about designing a venture that at its core has sustainability. And the first block is ethos, then purpose, product or service, the processes and the system, effectively how it all fits together. So to give a bit more detail, your ethos, as I said before, these are your guiding principles, your venture's values effectively. What is it that your venture believes in? What is it does that it doesn't do? As in willing or ready to do. The purpose is what your venture is trying to achieve, the value it creates, its raison d'etre effectively. Product or service, of course, this is what you are offering. The processes describe how you're producing, delivering, supporting, and disposing it. And I'd just like to point at that real quick. Processes in some models, business models and frameworks, usually means how you're producing something and selling it. Okay, but that's not enough when we're talking about sustainable venture. We need to look at how we're producing something. We need to look at how we're delivering something. We need to look at how we're supporting it. And we need to look at how it is being disposed. If we're not disposing of it, we need to see how it is being disposed, that which we're producing. The 5th building block is what I call the system, which is the question of how it all integrates. Effectively, how do your processes integrate into one another, but also how does your venture, your system that you've built, integrate into the surrounding systems, so your partners, your suppliers, and the larger environment, the community you're in, the city you're in, the infrastructure you're in, the ecology you're in. Okay. What we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve when we say we're trying to build an integrally sustainable venture, we're trying to build a venture that is innovative in one or all of these building blocks. So we're talking about these here. So it has to be innovative in one or all of these building blocks. That's the first step from moving away, the first step to move away from a superficial application of sustainability and actually feed it into this concept of sustainability into the design process of our venture. So there's got to be some form of innovation that drives sustainability in one of these, at least one of these blocks. Okay? The other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to build a venture that is informed by sustainability in most of these blocks. So innovation alone is not enough. Yeah, coming up with a new process that helps me do something faster, but on the other end produces 10 times more waste than our previous process is not good enough for a sustainable venture design. We need to look for innovation that is informed by sustainability. Okay, so how do we go about building a venture that is informed by the sustainable vision? And how exactly we build such a venture, how exactly this vision looks like, how exactly the design looks like, in the end, that's really up to you. And it should be up to you because it's yours. It's your vision, it's your constraint, it's your design, it's your innovation. So sorry, there is not a template answer that I can give to you. I know it's convenient usually to have a 5-step approach to the promised land, but unfortunately in the new frontier that is sustainability and sustainable venturing, sustainable entrepreneurship, there are no templates yet, at least none that I think are worthwhile sharing and that work on an integral level. So if I can't give you a template, what can I share with you today in this webinar? What I would like to share with you are some general design advice and guidelines when you go about effectively developing a sustainable vision and designing your venture on it. And yeah, let's go back to that. The way we'd like to look at it today is we'll take these 5 building blocks that we've established: ethos, purpose, product, and service, processes, and system. And these 4 dimensions of integral sustainability together with the characteristics of sustainable systems, and we'll see how we can match them up and how we can, what kind of questions we can ask in order to drive sustainable design in these fields. And because we're trying to build a sustainable venture, we'll take the characteristics of the sustainable system that we've established before, so purpose and ethos, transparency and openness, participation and contribution, and effectiveness and efficiency, and we'll orientate the next couple slides along those points. So let's start off with the question of purpose and ethos. I think it's quite easy to see where into the 5 building blocks of the venture those 2 fit in. And effectively, when it comes to the purpose and ethos, let me add to this. It's so obvious to have it as a characteristic of a system and then also have it in the venture design thing and see where it fits in. But the fact is, a lot of companies do not have a clear ethos, and a lot of social ventures do not have a clear purpose. So this might sound very, very simple, very, very basic, but it is absolutely essential. You have to make sure you have a clear purpose and an ethos. That means your values clear. What's driving you? What are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? What are the values that are informing your whole being and the being of your venture? I think this is one of the key elements of social and sustainable entrepreneurship, actually, or conscious, mindful entrepreneurship, that it takes these 2 into account. So they're critical to our type of business conduct. So let's look at it. Purpose and ethos. In designing a sustainable venture, you have to make sure that these are absolutely clear. As I just said, it's not enough to just have them. They have to be clear. So what are the values that underlie the venture? What change do you want to bring in the world? That's the purpose you're effectively delivering. Yeah. And here I'd like you to consider this for all 4 dimensions. So to go back to this thing here, I'm not sure if you can see it quite well. If you set out with your social venture to improve illiteracy rates, or bring education to disadvantaged groups. That's a purpose and impact that you're setting for the socio-cultural dimension. But I'd like you to consider there also, how are the individuals that are participating in your system being affected on the personal, spiritual, psycho-spiritual level as an individual? How is it affecting them? What's your purpose there? What are you aiming to achieve on that plane? Also, how are you affecting the infrastructures around you? How are you affecting the environment around you effectively? What's your purpose there? What are you aiming to achieve there? You might say, well, that's not central to me. Central to me it is that I want to bring, education to this group that I'm aiming. But just because let me put it this way, just because you're not planning for it doesn't mean you're not impacting on those dimensions. Yeah. So you are impacting. You will, regardless of whether you plan for it or not, you will have an impact on the individuals as individuals that participate in your venture. You will have an impact on the infrastructure, on the environment that you are embedded into. And hence, if we want to be sustainable, thoroughly sustainable and innovative, it makes sense to think about these dimensions and to plan for these dimensions. So let's here try to consider this for all these 4 dimensions. Then your purpose and your ethos. What you see a lot in corporations is they will have a complicated mission statement or a tagline that effectively, you're worth it and innovation every day, we measure things, whatnot. Sometimes it's misunderstood by entrepreneurs and especially social entrepreneurs, that this is some form of professionalism that we need to bring into our business. We need to have some form of elaborate charter, some form of mission statement, some form of complicated business plan that captures the purpose and the ethos. You don't need any of that. You don't need a mission statement. You don't need a slogan. You don't need a mantra. You don't need a human rights charter attached to your venture. You don't need any of that. What you need clarity within you and your team, what it is that drives you, and you need to be genuine about this and definite about it. So, yeah, let's leave it at that. Okay, why is that so? Because the ethos and the purpose are the DNAs. They're effectively the engine of your venture. They set the boundaries and they define the possibilities of your venture. Yeah, if by your ethos it is immoral to if by your ethos you set out that you do not want to produce any wastage with your venture, then that will limit you in the possibilities as to what you can do and how you can do it. And that's how it should be. That's exactly how it should be. Way too much of the entrepreneurship that's going on out there is entirely opportunistic and doesn't have a set of values that guides it. And that's not a political statement I'm making, it's a statement from a business perspective. What that leads to is that we're missing out on all kinds of innovation. We're missing out on all kinds of innovation because the constraints are what drive us into new innovation. So the ethos and the purpose need to be clear. They need to be on all 4 dimensions. They need to be definite. Okay, on the purpose is maybe less definite because you start out your venture and you might end up pivoting it a bit, but it should be fairly definite because they set the boundaries and define the possibilities for your venture. Okay, why is this important? Why is this important? So far it sounds like an add-on. Why is this important? In order to answer the question, I'd like to look at Michael Porter's strategies for competitive advantage. Michael Porter is a management consultant and an academic, a strategist, one of the most famous, that in the 80s effectively proclaimed that there are only 2 ways to compete on the marketplace. It's either via differentiation or via price leadership. So either you are different in some way, you've got different features, or you are cheaper than everyone else. Okay, and this is, as simple as it is, it's quite all-encompassing. It's a good one, this one. But I would argue that things are changing, and what we're actually looking at now, with the internet revolution, if you like, and higher participation, the social media revolution, and higher participation of the individual in public life and commercial life, is competing by authenticity. Yeah, competing by authenticity. That's not being different. That means being you. Being you, not different, but being you, being authentic in what it is that you do, why you do it, and how you go about doing it. Okay? And here's a wonderful example of that. Yeah? Dr. Bronner's Magic Soap. I'm not sure if any of you have seen this in the shops. It's available in most of the major retailers, at least here in the UK. And Dr. Bronner's Magic Soap, its label basically covers all that Dr. Bronner and his team ever believed or will believe in, I believe. It is, maybe you can see it, I'm not sure if you can read this, but it has Bible phrases, it's got quotes from Einstein, it's got Chinese proverbs, it just covers the entire mission statement effectively, directly printed on the product. And these guys, yeah, it's authentic. It's authentic. You can see it when you read it, you look at it, it's authentic, and hence it has a place in the market. So you can compete via authenticity as well. And this is really important for social or sustainable ventures, because we're not looking to make a big buck, and we're not looking to screw anyone over. So we need to find other ways to be enticing. Authenticity is one of them. That's why purpose and ethos, the guidelines I've given you, are so important. Okay, then let's look at transparency and openness. Transparency effectively meaning our venture is not opaque. We can, it can be seen what we do and how we do it. To give a non-transparent example, for Shell, for example, and its activities in Nigeria are very untransparent. We do not know what the processes are. We do not know what the dealings are. We do not know how they go about things. So transparency and then openness. We want to see how we can turn our ethos when we're asking about the design, how we can introduce transparency and openness into the 5 building blocks that we have, effectively ethos, purpose, product, service, processes, systems. And this is really a task that, you know, you'll have to sit down and think about it. It's not something that I can give you a blueprint for. It's unique to your venture. What is it that you do? How much transparency can you allow into it? By the way, usually much more than you expect or than you think you can. How open can you design your processes? But as guidelines, I'd like to encourage you to be transparent and to promote openness. Simple as that, okay? And I'd also like to share with you some of the questions you can ask in the process of designing for openness and transparency. Effectively regarding your product. Again, it says here, your product should be clear and focused. That's a form of transparency. Having a clear product that has a clear message, or clear service for that matter, that has a clear message and a clear purpose, is a form of transparency. So on the product level, make sure you have a transparent product. Okay, this includes what it does, for whom it is, and how it works. Okay, also who's doing it and why. Yeah, so this is in particular for services. Who are the people that are running the services that you're doing? We recently had a meeting with a company in Germany where for a large development contract, where after about an hour of doing an intake, what these guys need, you know, what the position is, what are the difficulties, the CEO of the company asked my colleague about our background, so about our company's background effectively. And my colleague looked at me and said, I'll answer that if you don't mind. And then he starts talking about his personal background, his life story effectively, very briefly so, but he starts telling him about where he's from and who he is and what he likes to do and why he's in there. And my first reaction was, Jesus, what is this? Why are you doing this? But in fact, this is very important. You know, this is something that we are currently keeping out of business because we have this notion of professionalism in our mind where, you know, we're effectively a gray box that produces an output and that's it. But in a world that values authenticity, that values higher levels of participation, that has higher citizen involvement in all processes of creation and destruction, it's really important to know who is doing the things that your venture is doing. Yeah. So I encourage you to be transparent about that as well. Who's doing it? You don't have to share your life story with everyone. By the way, our client today, then negotiation partner, they loved my partners, my business partners' response. They were really taken by it, and they effectively shared with us, and we got the job. But the point I want to make: don't be shy to be transparent about who you are, what are your qualifications, what are your dreams. And I'm not talking about sharing your CV with everyone. I'm talking about a heartfelt sharing, that which is important to your product, that which is important to your service. You know, yeah. Also, when it comes to product and service in terms of transparency and openness, communicate it, give access to it, let it be experienced. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that in a minute. But that's a form of openness. Too often we see entrepreneurs talk up the products, talk up the services, but then fail to ever land a contract because there is no way for the benefactors, the potential benefactors, to experience what it is that we want to offer to them. And especially in the field of social ventures or sustainable ventures, the benefits are often not as direct as, let's say, eating a chicken burger at McDonald's or playing with my new iPhone. So it helps to open up the experience of the product and service to be experienced by the users. When it comes to processes, here again, have some transparency on the question: how do you produce things? Yeah, who's involved? And how are they involved? Okay, who are the farmers that are supplying your coffee beans? There's a wonderful venture in Germany called Coffee Circle. You can look them up. They work with Kenyan coffee farmers in producing. Basically, they receive the coffee from the Kenyan farmers. They sell the coffee on over the internet in bulk in Germany, and then of the money that is effectively earned on the coffee, customers can pick the projects that some of that money goes into in order to develop the infrastructure and the process of these Kenyan farmers that supply them, and the entire profiles on them. Who are they? What are they? The customer doesn't just hear Kenyan farmer, but he actually gets to know who he's buying from. So that can drive your venture's attractiveness as well for the market. Also, what are your cost drivers? How do you spend your money? You know, this really helps building trust for social ventures in particular. Where's that money you're asking for? Where's that money you're earning going? I think many of us, I can for sure say me, you know, I'm very wary of many of the non-profit organizations that are out there because their cost structures and the way they spend the money is just so intransparent. Giving money to the Red Cross to me, yeah. Anyway, don't want to get into that rant, but you see where I'm coming from, I hope. In terms of the system, regarding openness, the somewhat abstract question: can resources and information flow freely through your system? So I think I'm going to leave it at that abstract and let you wonder about what that means. It can mean a lot of things. Resources, information, also means how do you keep parties that are involved with you informed? Yeah. So how do you keep your partners informed of the processes, the advances, the issues that you're facing? And also, how does your venture take in feedback, input, information from its environment, its partners, but also its larger environment? Again, its community, its infrastructural environment, its ecological environment. Here again, I'd like you to not only think about, but actually communicate or create transparency around how your venture impacts on all 4 dimensions, okay? And with honesty. So, you know, sometimes we'll set up a venture that does great things on 3 dimensions and then is not so sustainable in one of them. It can build trust and authenticity to actually share that, and it's the right thing to do. So transparency and openness on those levels. I want to give you an example because it might sound quite abstract, and you might wonder how the hell can I implement that into my business. The London Hackspace is a DIY space here in Hackney in London, where individuals can go in and they have a workshop, so effectively an atelier, if you like, with tools, saws, materials, wood, metals, and so on. They have an IT section with computers, spare parts, and whatnot. And effectively, people can just go in and hack about with these things. They can try around, they can build things. There isn't really a guided product, but it's that space made available to people. And the way the space operates is on a membership basis. So they fund themselves, and they fund themselves through membership structure. And the way that the London Hackspace sets its price is very interesting, because it doesn't really set a membership price. It basically says we have a minimum price of £5 per month for the membership. It's a donation, effectively, to the place. But then it lays out its cost structure on the page, and it says, this is what things cost us. So for us to be sustainable at 300 users, we need each user to pay 35 quid per month, for example. But they leave it up to the potential customer, the potential participant, to actually set the price that they want to set on the basis of being completely transparent on the cost structure. Last time I checked, these guys have still been around. They have been around for quite a while, so that seems to work. Then I talked before about being transparent and open about the experience in your product, and here is a nice example, maybe a bit less obvious, of what that could mean. Finjan is a jazz club or culture club, effectively, in Berlin, in the area of Neukölln, which used to be a bit of a deprived area, high percentage of immigrants, poor education, poor schools in the area, high crime rates and whatnot. And Finjan was founded by a bunch of guys that just really liked jazz, lived in Neukölln, and wanted to share the joy with the people around them. So they rented a space and started hiring musicians and organized these events, effectively, for people to come, performances for people to come and enjoy the jazz music. Problem is, they opened the shop, they invited musicians, they charged 5 quid at the door, which was, all right for the area, just to get by, effectively. And then no one shows up. No one shows up. No one shows up because the people can't relate to what's happening in there. So these guys effectively did a bit of research, and they worked out that predominantly Turkish community around them, they've never heard of jazz. They couldn't care less for jazz. They have no idea what it is. They can't imagine anything under the headlines that they've been posting. So these guys went away and they wondered, how can we get people interested in this event, in our events? And effectively what they figured is, if they were such lovers of jazz, they figured if people were to experience this stuff, then surely they would fall in love with it like we have, and then they would also love to pay for it. So effectively what they figured is, let them experience the event before they have to pay. So what they did is they effectively flipped the script, and instead of charging an entrance fee, what they did is they started charging an outrance fee. So you pay when you leave the place, yeah, if you liked it. Okay, so to spare you the details because we're running out of time, this was a huge success. They flipped the concept around. People were able to come in, take their kids, actually say, let's see, it's a Thursday or Tuesday evening, just got back from work, I've got nothing to do, we've had dinner, my kids are here, let me take them down the road and see what these guys are up to and what they're doing, and it sounds like there's something going on. So people would go in, then enjoy the performance. At the end, these guys would stand out there and say, this is what it cost us to get these guys in. We'd like we'd appreciate the contribution. If you liked it, it's 5 quid or more if you like. Open, effectively left open. And what happened was that people would, before people weren't willing to pay £5, no one showed up. After they flipped that script, after they allowed people to experience the product, so opened the experience of the product to non-customers effectively, people were happy to spend these £5 and actually €5 and actually spent more than that. So they would give donations on top of what these guys were asking for. Huge success. These guys are still around. Anyway, moving swiftly on because I think time is running a bit short. The third bit, and this is kind of the great frontier in sustainable system design and sustainable venture design, is the question of participation and contribution in these 5 building blocks again. There's a Dark Mountain project, which is a interesting project in terms of participation in the area of ethos and purpose, or the Occupy movements. I know they're not social ventures, or maybe they are social ventures. They were quite interesting in those fields as well, the question of participation and contribution on ethos and purpose. But really for our more, at least for my more market-orientated angle, participation and contribution really apply to the dimensions of to the building blocks of product, process, and system. And here, the revolution is conceptual. So what I would like you to do, what I would like to invite you to do when thinking about how you can structure, design your venture so that sustainability becomes the core of it and innovation becomes the driver of it, I'd like you to move away from the concept of users, customers, and producers and towards the concept of participants. Think about participants. What's the difference there? Simple. A customer, the only way your venture can relate to a customer is via transaction. You sell them something. In the end, you sell them something. That's the way to relate. But that's not the only way to relate. Thank God. Otherwise, we'd all just be transacting all the time with our children, our partners, our friends. As participants, we're not only transacting, but we can act and we can interact. So we can do something and we can share something. And if you consider this in your process design and your system design, this really opens a lot of doors. And I'll show you one or two examples. Opens doors for innovation. I'll show you a couple examples in a minute what that can look like. Also, I'd like you to start thinking not in terms of who's paying me, who can I get money from, but to start to think in terms of benefits and contributions beyond financial terms. Much too often, we'll sit with entrepreneurs that say, "Ooh, I need money. I need money. I need $500,000 to start my venture. I just raised $1 million, but it's not enough. Another $2 million." And when you ask them, and then we move on and we ask them, "Well, what do you need that money for? What do you need that money for?" In the worst cases, the people will know. They just think we need that figure because effectively they need to sustain themselves. Or in some better cases, they will actually start to think and work out that much of the things that they thought they need, that they need and they thought they need money for in order to pay for it, they can get in other ways through the venture by getting people involved in a way, creating a benefit for them, and as a contribution receiving the bit that they need. So I'd like you to start thinking about benefits and contributions beyond financial terms. Again, I'll give you an example in a minute what that can look like. The kind of questions you can ask in designing for this are first setting getting an idea of what your scenario, what your system at the moment looks like, asking who's participating in your system. And when you ask that, again, ask on all 4 dimensions. You might be missing out. It's not just the obvious bit. So the person that's producing your product, the person that's supplying your resources, the person that's buying your product, that's not all. Again, what about the community that is surrounding your office, for example? Yeah. What about the infrastructure that you're using every day? What about the neighboring businesses, competing suppliers? These are all potential participants in your system. The other question is, how are they participating? What are they contributing, and how are they benefiting? Very often in social business, what we see is that entrepreneurs are not conscious, they're not mindful, they're not conscious of quite all the value that they're creating for the participants in the system, which means they're creating a lot of benefit for others, but receiving no contributions in return. So by asking these questions, you can make sure that you raise your awareness to who's actually participating in your system, how they're benefiting, how they're contributing, and you design for and it allows you to effectively design for increased contributions or improved benefits and a better interdependency between your partners, your participants, and you in your venture design. How else could they benefit and contribute? That's effectively asking about pivoting the way you're doing something. Maybe you could be doing it differently. A few words on this. Sustainable systems usually have strong interdependency. I've said this word a few times. Interdependency effectively means that I'm dependent on you and you are dependent on me. It's not one way. These relationships are usually mutually beneficial and binding. So that means we're dependent on one another, but in a beneficial way. So it's not a sadomasochistic relationship where we're just sticking together because we can't help it, but we're actually both benefiting, growing together, growing together effectively. Okay, so one way to ask as a social venture, especially if you're struggling to be financially sustainable or economically sustainable, is to ask the question, how can I increase interdependency with my partners? It might be a chance if you're struggling to survive financially, economically, that you are very dependent on your partners around you, but they aren't very dependent on you or the participants that are around you. So here you could ask, how else could I get them involved? How else could I benefit them? Or you could ask, should I benefit someone else? That I can build a more sustainable relationship with, a more interdependent relationship with. Okay? Again, think of it on all 4 dimensions. I think I have a few more minutes. An example would be Open Design City, which is again an open workshop, this time in Berlin. Their space and workshop is completely participant driven. So they don't have staff. They have something they call citizenship. You can become a citizen of an open design city. The users are effectively also the managers, are effectively also the innovators. They run their own workshops in there. So the people that use the space, the customers effectively, become content providers, content deliverers for that space in itself. So they've really moved away from the idea of customer producer to the idea of participant. And it's effectively democratization process of production, design, and so on. Another venture that I'm giving you these so you can look them up, because unfortunately there's not enough time to go deeply into all of them. Energy Street Fight was one of our projects where we effectively we set up a street fight in Berlin, a virtual street fight in Berlin, where on a street in Prenzlauer Berg, the right side of the street was competing against the left side of the street on the energy consumption. And this was an elaborate game with some 1,000 flats participating, and the whole thing was self-sustainable. So we effectively ran the whole thing without needing much money by involving participants, by involving the customers, so the people that lived on the street, as participants in the venture. So it was effectively a co-creational effort, this project. It grew through its participants, it was developed through its participants, and in the end it was also, the benefits will be by its participants. Okay, last bit, and then we wrap it up, is the obvious bit, which is effectiveness and efficiency. In all of these building blocks, we need to design for effectiveness and efficiency. And I know this is a very silly question to ask, but it's actually not so silly. Are you achieving what you set out to achieve? This is so important. Often we get lost in our, especially as entrepreneurs that work on their own, so without a partner. We get lost in the reasoning, in the rationale, in the conceptualizations we've made of the marketplace, of the products we wanted to provide, that we forget to ask, are we actually being effective? Are we achieving what we set out to achieve on all the dimensions? Remember, we want to achieve something on all dimensions in order to be holistic and integrally sustainable. Are we achieving what we set out to achieve? And once the answer to this is yes, or potential yes, yeah, we can move on to the efficiency bit and ask the question, ask, for example, these questions. What resources are we currently using? What resources are we currently omitting? Yeah? In lay terms, this would be what waste are we producing? And this doesn't have to be material waste. This could be spiritual waste, intellectual waste. But really, we shouldn't think of it as waste. We should think of it as resources. Because as someone recently put it to me, waste is just resources at the wrong space, at the wrong place in time and space. So How much of these things are you using? Okay. How many parties are involved in your production processes? How many processes actually do you have in the production and delivery of your services or products? And how is your system arranged through time and space? These are some of the questions you can ask in order to kick off thinking about how to increase the efficiency of your venture. The questions alone, I'm not going to do it, but for example, the question how many parties are involved in the production of the process. Let's say it's 10 at the moment in the production of the product or service. Let's say it's 10 at the moment. You could set a design constraint and say, okay, I want to narrow this down to 3 parties involved, and let me see how I can design a system. And then you go away with that constraint, definite constraint, and you try to design something, a process that works like that. You could do the same with the processes here. Yeah, how's your system arranged through time and space? The question, how do your processes arrange through time and space? So what's the temporal arrangement? So that's first, then that, then that, then that. What happens if you flip them? For example, the Finjan example could also be an example for this. All right, or what if you change the locations, the physical space of where things happen? Will that increase efficiency? I talked about setting a constraint and then designing something. Remember Arthur's chairs. The first one didn't look all too exciting. I think the second one looked much more exciting. When you move on designing with these constraints, you want to aim for first developing a minimum viable product. So you don't want to come up with something that's finished. You just want to come up with something that works first, okay? With something that works. So that's a concept that's very valuable to think of when you think of designing for efficiency, is the minimum viable product. It's just a question, what's the minimum I need to develop in order to deliver my purpose, okay? Also it says here, wastage and circularity. Like I just said, I'd like you to start to not think in terms of wastage, but actually resources at the wrong place. And circularity, ideally you design a process, you set yourself a constraint where you design a process. This is on the economical dimension, where the inputs, the outputs that you produce, and the resources that you omit either find a way back into your system or find a way back into someone else's system. Again, this is a way to become financially or economically sustainable when you don't expect it. Okay, there's the wonderful, when you're struggling to do that, I mean. There's a wonderful example for this that you can look it up. I would encourage you to Google it. It's called the Food Loop. It's also a venture in London. It's run by Sustain RCA and the Seed Foundation. And what they have done is they've managed to recycle food waste into locally at a housing estate in near King's Cross. On the premises, the community will collect its food waste, process it into compost, which is then seeded and planted on the roofs of the estate and the terraces of the estate, where then food is grown, fruits and vegetables, which are then again consumed by the residents and so forth. The whole thing again is financially viable, economically viable. They're not necessarily making money with it, but the system works, it's running, and that's also because, again, people are contributing, and the people that designed the system have thought about the contributions that they can receive and that they can give out beyond financial terms. Okay, lots of stuff, and I could go on and on and on and on, but my time, unfortunately, has run out, and I want to remind you that I've just given you a few guidelines, and unfortunately, I cannot give you a blueprint, and I think no one can, and anyone who tell you that they can, you shouldn't listen. You need to develop your vision. You need to make your design. You need to come up with your innovation, but creativity, perseverance, and experimentation are the key for that, and then I'm sure you manage to leverage your venture into something that has sustainability at its core. I hope this was useful for you, and I thank you for your time, and I'm open for your questions now, or if you want to think about the stuff, you also feel free to email me, get in touch, and discuss. I'd be happy to hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much, Habib. Thank you for sharing that with us, and I know we talked about this even before you started. I know it is a wide topic, and we had to try and again ask you to put it into 50 minutes or an hour. Is probably a bit unfair of us. So So thank you for giving us an overview. A lot of really interesting thoughts there, particularly one that makes me think it's the one around personal sustainability, or I think you were calling it the psycho-spiritual sustainability, particularly when it comes to social entrepreneurs. They often have a lot of the sustainability principles embedded in their work from the word go, because that's the way they run their businesses. But then with that passion and that energy, often also comes to sort of compulsion or desire to spend all your time in running a venture, and then looking after yourself might sometimes be forgotten. So that would be a very interesting one, maybe to delve in a bit deeper as well, and get some examples on how entrepreneurs might what sort of things they might be able to put in place to look after themselves and their staff, particularly at the startup phase. But I don't want to take up your time with that question. There was one question I did want to ask you, one that came through, and any of the others, I'll probably just connect you directly with the people who asked.
Okay, brilliant.
But there was one of the participants was asking, how would you apply this if your venture requires you to work in a partnership with someone, say a government or a big corporation, whose ethos and processes may not be quite as ethical as yours? So it's one thing to try and apply this for yourself, but how do you apply this if you work in partnership with someone who perhaps isn't as integrally sustainable as you are?
Yeah, mm-hmm. That's a great question. I mean, within the logic of what I was talking about and what really the purpose of this presentation was, I would say take the fact that these guys, their values are less ethical than yours, and design around it. Yeah? I mean, as simple as that sounds and as banal as that sounds, but make it another constraint. That would be one way to go about it. The other thing, we talked about authenticity. There's a very, very, very strong pull from the market side, to put it in business terms, for more sustainability, more transparency, more openness, more authenticity. So if you're coming in as an ethical venture and you've gotten to the point where you can actually you have someone in government and large corporation that actually listens to you, it might be worthwhile to talk about it and approach them with it, and use that as a negotiation base, actually. So this is one of the points I try to make, and I know it's not enough time to get it across clearly, but much too often we see our high ethics and high standards and high expectations in terms of our impact on our environment as a constraint, as something negative, as something that we need to apologize for, that we need to integrate. It's not that. It's becoming an aspect for competitive advantage. The market is pulling for it. So one invitation I would extend would be to flip the script in the mind and say, hey, actually, these higher ethical standards of mine, they are an asset, and I'm going to take them into negotiation with these guys, and I'm going to ask them, okay, I'm going to bring this into our partnership. What can I get out of this? And then if none of this works, then I would challenge whether you should work with them. Simple as that. I mean, we said no to several potential clients and big contracts because we had the feeling that, especially in the coaching, the things that they've asked us to do effectively was a form of manipulation of their workforce, and we weren't willing to do that. So I want to say, if there's a lack of an awareness on your partner's side, then you can talk about it. You can try to raise the awareness. If there's a blatant ignorance or even a blatant approval of contradictory values to yours, destruction of value, then I would say move away from that partner. It's not the right partner for you. That's part of the design process, elimination, to say, okay, this is not the right thing for me. And then you need to pivot around and see if you can find another partner, find another angle. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. If you would like to speak more about that, please email me.
Great. I'll share your contact details, Habib, afterwards with all the participants, so you will get you will get the email address and you can then make contact. Just one final question, and not necessarily a quick one, but there's a question here about, you talked about seeing your clients or your users as participants. So you were using the term participant rather than consumer, for instance. And how this might be quite new actually to a lot of people to think about it in those terms. Is there anywhere where potential social entrepreneurs could learn a bit more about adopting this approach? I mean, I know you teach at the business school and that's for the students, but is there anywhere you know of and that people could perhaps learn a bit more on that? And if you don't know anything straight away, then you can think about it and let us know, and we'll share that with the listeners.
So, I mean, that's a wonderful question, and for one, I would say take a weekend trip to Berlin, go to Kreuzberg, and just look around. There's lots and lots and lots going on there. It's the motherland of participatory system design in Europe. The other thing, if that's prohibitive, time-wise or cost-wise, you can check out our website of the Institute, Institute of Integral Entrepreneurship. So it's www.integral-entrepreneurship.org. There's a course on there which is called New Venture Thinking, which is a course that we have, that's effectively the course that we teach at Cass Business School, with some alterations. And you can sign up for that. It's free, and we'll approve you. Just let me know that you signed up via this webinar, and then you can find out more about that in there, or you can get in touch with me, and I'm happy to talk to you about it, and maybe even look at what you're doing, how you're doing it, and see how that could be turned into a participatory approach. It's unfortunately, it's very difficult to refer you to any academic papers or books because there aren't any. None that I know of anyway, that go deeper than I have gone by saying shift the concept. It's a fairly new way of looking at things, and we need to experiment with it and come up with ways that work and blueprints effectively before someone's going to put out a book or a paper like that. But integralentrepreneurship.org, New Venture Thinking course, it's free. You can sign up for that. There are 2 or 3 lectures on that in there with video and slides and additional readings and a discussion board, or you can get in touch with me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I think we will have to draw this to a close now. I'm conscious that we've run over, so apologies to participants for that. We do aim to finish on time. Thank you so much, Habib. Really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone who signed in, logged in, and posted questions. This is, as some of you will know, this webinar is part of a series of webinars that Unlimited is hosting this autumn. We have a few more coming up. There's one actually tomorrow, which hasn't been advertised because initially it was going to be an internal one. But Richard Alderson, the founder of Unlimited India, will be hosting a webinar tomorrow lunchtime on impact DNA, discovering for aspiring and social entrepreneurs who've already started, discovering the best way to create most impact you can within your own context. I'll send you details about that. And then we have another webinar on the 8th of October, which will be Introduction to Branding. So those 2 coming up over the next couple of weeks. So hopefully, if those sound like the sort of thing that are relevant to you, you can dial in again. But okay, we will close it now. Unless you have any final words, Habib, we will say thank you to everyone and wish everyone
thank you to everyone
for the day.
Good luck with your ventures, and thank you for the time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.